I remember even as a child in situations that would make me uncomfortable or that I was scared of or that would be such a challenge to me. I remembered so distinctly, and I do this now where I whisper to myself, like, be brave, be brave, be brave. I think through that revisiting of my childhood and that upbringing, a way for me to find healing has been through also recognizing how proud I am of myself and the child I was to have made it through that, all of those identities, all those cultures, all of that code switching to survive and to keep making it. Like I'm proud of that part. And I think that's a way for me to not own the trauma, but to acknowledge it, but also to find the joy and also the power of how it led to the person I am now.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Wakabayashi, and you're listening to Yellow Glitter, perspectives from queer Asian creatives and changemakers making impact. This episode, we're joined by an extra special guest, Louis Lee. Louis is the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of Bellweather, a strategy-led creative agency that specializes in transforming legacy brands in the nonprofit, healthcare, and travel sector. Louis is passionate about helping brands thrive in an ever-changing landscape, particularly by expanding and diversifying audiences, including women, people of color, and Gen Z, ensuring that brands not only grow, but remain relevant in their competitive markets. Though Louis calls New York City home, he carries his Midwestern roots with pride, having been born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. His journey as a queer Asian creative has been shaped by his experiences in the vibrant communities he's been a part of, fueling his dedication to fostering inclusivity and creativity in all that he does. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
Thank you. So excited for our conversation. You and I met months ago, actually, now. We were at an event with one of our friends, Ty, who's been on the podcast celebrating his birthday. And we were just sitting in proximity with each other. Ty had introduced us together. And once we started talking, I felt like you were almost like a longtime friend for many years. We're both in the agency space, creating our projects. We're doing work that we think is community centered, impact driven work. And I just really loved our conversation and you creating space. And I was like, yes, like let's bring you on the podcast one. But I was like, I want to get to know more of you as a person. You're just like so cool, so down to earth, and just a kind, kind soul.
Well, the feelings were completely mutual. I think we ended up talking mostly to each other that night, but it's not just being in a creative space. Like, we're also both queer Asian business owners, which further really narrows kind of how we could relate to each other. So it truly felt like this. I remember us saying to each other, or at least I said to you, this almost the universe really wanted to bring us together that night. And especially in that moment for me, when I really needed someone that could just relate to me, it felt almost cosmic that we had met. And it's been really awesome getting to know you too.
Same. And the news for you, you just recently got married, right?
Yeah, I did.
What was that like? What had happened?
Well, it's crazy because I've been with my now husband for 10 years before we got married last week. And a lot of people told us, and even to each other, we're like, what could really feel different after being together this long? It's probably just going to feel the same. But it really did give a shift in it. We might just be in our honeymoon phase, but I feel an incredible amount of security, just being legally recognized as a union with this person that I've been in a relationship with 10 years. There's so many reasons for why we wanted to mark 10 years of being together by getting married, but also it's in many things practical. Like I just can't imagine anyone making healthcare decisions for me if it ever came to that, knock on wood. But
Hmm.
it there has been this feeling and this shift, and it feels great to solidify or pour concrete into our relationship with getting married.
Yeah. So the question I have that maybe some people are also thinking, 10 years, did you think about it earlier on? Like, what was your thoughts on marriage going into the relationship? And what was the turning moment when you're like, let's get married? Was there something that had happened that made you reflect and go, like, we just got to do it now?
That is a great question. For us, going into our relationship, even from the early onset, we felt really committed to each other.
Hmm.
So there was never this feeling of needing to rush because in the grand scheme of eternity, everything still felt early. Even saying I've been with my husband for 10 years still feels like there's so many more years to enjoy and to look ahead to. So there's never that rush. And also, us being in New York City, me running a business, he's a really ambitious corporate girly, as we call it. We didn't really have that time to
Mm.
reflect. And it just sort of quickly flashed by. It felt like yesterday that we still met. So it really just has been this whirlwind of living our life, professionally developing, and then us sort of stopping and realizing we should talk about what's next in our relationship. And I think
Mm.
a key point in me in terms of when I wanted to propose, which was 8 years of being together. So it was about 2 years ago,
Mhm.
was me realizing and reflecting that this is incredibly serious and I need to tell my parents about this relationship
Mm.
because actually, in the 8 years of us being together at that time, they really didn't know about my personal life because of
Mm.
many factors that we'll get into.
Mhm.
And I told them I've been in this relationship with this man for 8 years now. It's really serious. And with that sharing and, with the challenges with my relationship with my parents,
Yeah.
I wanted to be honest with them and also solidify my commitment to my now husband by proposing to him.
Mm.
So it was a mix of several events that made it feel like the right time when I proposed. And for us, we decided to just wait a couple more years to hit that 10-year mark so that we can immortalize what we did for our 10 years of being in a relationship by getting married. So that's kind of how it all panned out.
Wow. Well, I have to ask, what
hmm
was that experience like when you were telling your family about it?
It's very much like my coming out. It was over the phone. They're back in St. Louis, and I've since graduating school have always lived away from St. Louis, whether it was Chicago or New York City or where I went to school. I, of course, am someone that would have loved the interaction to be in person, but sometimes things just happen where you're on the phone with somebody, the conversation leads from one thing to another. I am recalling that we were talking specifically about holiday plans. So
Mhm.
over the past 8 years, even 10 years of our relationship, Reggie and I, when it comes to holiday times, it can be challenging for us because we both have parents that aren't accepting of
Mhm.
our relationship. So it's usually the time we often go to each other's respective hometowns. And I remember my mom or my dad, my parent, asking about my holiday plan that year. And what led to me telling them about my relationship is I don't think I'm going to come home or come to St. Louis this year because I want to spend it with my family.
Mm.
And it turned into, what family? We are your family, which led to me saying, you are
Mm.
my family, but I also have my own family now. You know, I have
Mm.
this man, Reggie. I have a dog with this man. Like, we are a family, and this is my family, and I want to spend the holiday with him. So that's how the conversation kind of emerged, with me not coming out, but just sharing that I'm in a relationship.
Yeah.
Because I had come out to them years prior, also over the phone, and
Yeah.
also in very similar circumstances, just us catching up, and then it's sort of just coming up that way in
Mm.
this organic way. So, that of course created a tension with my parents, as it's always have.
Mm.
But yeah, that's how the news sort of came out to my parents that I've been in this relationship. And, Reggie is my husband, is also in a similar situation. And that's something that we navigate together continually.
Mm. Has the relationship on the topic changed since the 2 years? Have they asked about it? Have they been curious? What has it been like navigating leading up to the marriage and even after marriage?
It's still Reggie and I describe it to people as don't ask, don't tell situation. It's very much like that way. It's like a no fly zone.
Mhm. They're still figuring out with you,
Right.
like their reaction to it. Yeah.
And, unfortunately, because we have that distance between us, the physical distance,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
really isn't many opportunities to have conversations without either my parents or myself taking that proactivity of making a connection via a phone call,
Mm.
a phone chat. So with that, the conversations are so far and few between
Mm.
that
Yeah.
it just doesn't get brought up.
Yeah.
And it's over the past 2 years, I haven't been going back to my hometown as frequently because of how much more of family events are now centered around Reggie and myself, or
Hmm.
meeting up instead my sister who doesn't live in St. Louis. So our holidays are starting to evolve with
Hmm.
we can call it a chosen family, even though my sister is my blood relative and I have nephews.
Yeah.
So we're forming new traditions with family. It just
Hmm.
doesn't include our parents. And
Mm.
that's something that is more of them missing out. You know what I mean? Like, we are really excited, and, my siblings, or Reggie's sibling is also really excited by us forming these new traditions together, and what we see as a future together as a family, and what our holidays can look like. And we all know holiday time can be really, it can come with a lot of tension and
Yeah.
a lot of feelings for many individuals, especially queer folks. So,
Very.
yeah. So, I haven't had a real opportunity to sit with my parents and to continue the conversation. But right now, I'm just protecting my joy and this kind of love bubble I'm in with my husband. So,
Yeah.
when the right time comes, I hope that we, or myself, can at least bring it up. And it's not seeking acceptance from them, because I never want them to feel I'm trying to change their mindset on anything.
Yeah.
But for me, it's always about being honest with myself. So
Yeah.
coming out to them again with, now I'm married, has less to do with how they feel and a lot more to do with how I respect my relationship, and how my joy isn't determined by them.
Yeah.
And it is truly a respect to my relationship and myself.
Yeah.
And just getting them to know that this is where I'm currently at Now, I don't want it to sound like I disrespect them in any way, but I
Yeah.
I also want to know I also want to let the people that have raised me and that have brought me into this world to know that, hey, this is who this person is.
Yeah.
A part of me wants them to at least know that much.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge theme on the podcast, and this navigation of Asian identities and Asian background, and also the layer of the United States and culturally, especially in the Midwest, like it's not
Yeah,
like as accepting as many coastal cities, right? And there's just so
absolutely.
many. Even like for myself, I was raised in an area that was about 45 minutes east of Los Angeles, and it was so conservative, and nobody was out. And it's so funny that there's so many more people who were actually like queer and out, and it just took many years. It's so fascinating to see how we all come to the same space of this desire to be free, but to be free is also to reconcile how we navigate these situations, because we still are tied to it, right? Your family still lives there.
Absolutely.
You still have to go back to just show face, right? To still keep that relationship.
Yeah,
But we can never get rid of the past and the history of how we were raised, our upbringing, and a big part of our healing is also reconciling that relationship
absolutely.
and formulating a new relationship with it, a new way forward with it. And it is very healing and very hard work to do, you know?
It really is. And, you talking about that, it's a lot of code switching that we had to do growing up.
Mm,
Like, we're talking about being born to Korean immigrants.
yeah.
That is an identity there. Being in the Midwest,
Hmm.
where the Asian community or population is very small.
Yeah.
So that's another identity to navigate.
Are they also religious?
My parents are very religious.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to switch into. I grew up church 3 times a week. Reggie also grew up in a very similar situation.
Mm,
It is 3 or more types of services throughout the week. And
wow.
then also the queer identity part of it.
Hmm.
And as a child, not having any modeling for that.
Hmm.
So we're already listed like 4 or 5 different types of identities or cultures, maybe, that we had to navigate.
Hmm.
So that is incredibly challenging for any child to grow up in. But to your point as well, looking back on that, as traumatic as it can appear, I think something that I'm learning about looking back at that and my upbringing is
Hmm.
really, I find healing through owning how I navigated through that. That's how I survived growing up.
Mm,
And the thing that comes up with me is I remember even as a child in situations that would make me uncomfortable or that I was scared of or that would be such a challenge to me. I remembered so distinctly, and I do this now where I whisper to myself, like, be brave, be brave, be brave. And
mm,
I remember also, and to this day, I feel this. I often would feel pride with myself. Like, I give my own like tap on the shoulder, like, you did a good job by having faced that. It
mhm,
was uncomfortable. It was scary, but you did that. So I think through that revisiting of my childhood and that upbringing,
mhm,
a way for me to find healing has been through also recognizing how proud I am of myself
mm,
and the child I was to have made it through that. All of those identities, all those cultures, all of that code switching to survive and to keep
Mm-hmm.
making it. Like I'm proud of that part. And I think that's a way for me to not own the trauma, but to acknowledge or just make it feel less painful. It's
Mm.
it's a way to own it and to acknowledge it, but also to find the joy and also the power of how it led to the person I am now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And where do you think you picked up on that? This reminder to be brave. Where did you pick it up?
I don't recall where I picked it up in childhood, but it's lately been coming up for me because one work that I am doing lately is working with an executive coach that my partners and I are working with because we always want to improve and be better
Hmm.
leaders or business owners. And part of the work that we do is individually, we kind of look back at our upbringing and our childhood in order to understand who we are as leaders to this day. Because a lot
Mm.
of how we are as adults is still very much informed by
Hmm.
our childhood experiences. So, with this work that I'm doing, a lot of this has come to surface again.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I've been so open to it because it's another opportunity for me to continue to grow as a person, to improve how I want to be as a manager to people and how I want to lead. And obviously all of the personal impacts it has in terms of self discovery, which for all of us should never end. We should always be working on our own self discovery, at least from my perspective.
Hmm.
So I just can't remember as a child where that came from in terms of me telling myself to do that. I think I believe that like I've always had a lot of ambition growing up. Like
Hmm.
I've always wanted to be the leader of things. I always wanted to be presidents of the clubs, whatever they are.
Hmm.
That was this almost like natural thing that came within me. And I don't quite know what it's informed by. Like perhaps it is growing up closeted where you want to control your environment, all that stuff. Perhaps it is a little bit of that, but I was genuinely interested in
Hmm.
leadership type roles even as a kid. So I think having that ambition, that personality must have come with that aspect of telling myself to be brave and to just face things.
Mm.
And of course, I can recognize that a lot of that might also be informed by the harmful things we hear as closeted children growing up. You
Hmm.
know, like you have to be this way. Otherwise, you're going to be called these kinds of names, right?
Mm.
And
Hmm.
in the fear of being called those names, I wanted to challenge myself so that I rejected those names.
Mm.
So, of course, there's part of that that I understand may feed into why I kept telling myself to be brave, be brave, be brave.
Hmm.
But I do also recognize that it brought me a lot of joy to face a lot of those challenges, even as a kid. Like, I remember like an internal smile I would have by just having done something that was really scary to me.
Hmm.
Because I do want to look back on my childhood and recognize all of the happiness that still was there. Because I don't want to completely not acknowledge the positive things that came with my upbringing as well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Because all those things can be true, right? We can
absolutely.
have a tumultuous time, but also a joyous time. We can be scared, but also be brave. And this notion that there is one flavor that is the dominant one, maybe that's what feels at most, right? Like the one that's taking over emotionally for this phase of our lives, but all of them. can be true as a part of the experience. I love what you said about how as adults, we're constantly doing things that we are healing from as child, or just basically our childhood experiences evolve to the next level. And a big part of something that I love is the Enneagram, right? Which is the whole concept of an Enneagram is there are 9 personality types. Each of them is based on a childhood unmet need. And that we as adults are just yearning, doing things just to get like being heard, being loved. And it all goes back to how did the child miss out on gaining love? And so we basically the 9 personality types is built around like, I have to act special. I have to be really smart. I have to help others. And so we end up creating these character types that then become archetypes that we live within. And I'm just so genuinely curious as you're doing this work in the corporate work setting with your business partners, what has come up for you as just like, oh, wow, like that was really insightful?
I think a big thing for me now, I'm not familiar with the 9 personality types, but I do recognize something that I'm missing is my own self advocacy.
Hmm.
That's something that I'm like working through. It's something that's really new to me. And
Hmm.
I, and I'm excited by that, right? Like, it is exciting to unveil something that may not have been serving me or that has been serving me. And I think something that I have been discovering through the work I'm doing is I can be a better self advocate to myself. And that's something that I really want to help others with as well, especially on the topic of being a queer Asian person. Like, I think self advocacy is really important for us, for anyone, but on the topic of queer Asian folks, like most certainly self advocacy,
Why?
I think something that my partners and I say to each other too is no one's coming to save us. So we have to be our own self advocates.
Hmm.
And my partners aside, looking at the working queer Asian population, there are harmful stereotypes about Asians in the workplace that probably a lot of us are familiar with. And for us, I think it's such an opportunity to reject those stereotypes because we aren't those stereotypes. And I think one way to do that is truly through self advocacy and really asking for what we want and what we need in terms of the workplace setting. And obviously, this can impact your personal life as well with your relationships and friendships.
Mhm.
So, there's so many reasons for why self advocacy is super important. And for me, knowing how to self advocate is something that I'm excited to continue to learn and that I, in many ways, want to advocate for others to learn as well.
Mm. I have two follow-ups. The first one is, how do you know you were talking about things that don't serve you? How do you know when something isn't serving you?
That's a great question. How do I know when something isn't serving me is if I feel that there is a moment where it's not propelling me forward. And sometimes you can be unconscious of it, right? Like something I became aware of early on as a business owner is I may have been more comfortable being in the shadow or like in the back seat
Mhm.
where that didn't serve me. I am one of the business owners. The work that we create, a lot of it is something I'm responsible for as well. Like I should be able to speak to it.
Mhm.
So being sort of in that background or perhaps internalize something that I wasn't serving me was perhaps like, oh, I thought maybe I needed to be in the back seat or
Being the supporting character.
exactly that there was a point where I recognized that that isn't doing me any favors. That most certainly isn't self advocacy and also not great for my own visibility. Like I am an owner of the business.
Mm.
I need to show up in that way, also show up as a partner to my partners. So I think breaking out of what I may have operated in this own type of internalized stereotype within myself is something that I needed to break through.
Where do you think it came from?
That moment,
Yeah. I mean, like, where do you think it came from? This need to fulfill this role, right?
yeah,
Like to be the supporting character.
it feels like this system that was set up that way, right? Like I think I
Mm,
didn't realize I was operating within that system. Like simply felt this is how it usually is or how it should be. But when I'm in a meeting and there's a client or prospective client where I might not have said anything at that time throughout the whole meeting,
mm,
and at the end are asking, who is that person?
mm,
That's not right. Right. Like, it's like, I shouldn't be someone that is at the end of the meeting, someone's wondering who I am or what role I played in something. And that was a turning point for me because I realized I was operating within that stereotype of a quiet Asian worker rather than what I know is true within me, which is no, I'm actually a very vocal person. I can speak to my own work and I am an owner of this business. So that moment for me early on when I was owning this business, when that prospective client kind of like brought up, you know, the who are you, not in a negative way, just in a genuine curiosity. It just brought that up in me where I asked myself those questions
mm,
inside. And from that moment, I said to myself, like, I'm going to work on this. And
mm.
everything leading after that, I'm going to work on making myself more visible, that my voice is significant and it is something that I want to combat in terms of rejecting
Mm.
whatever stereotypes that people might hold. I genuinely feel people don't mean to have that malicious intent. I just feel like culturally, especially in the Western setting, it's something that we all operate in. Like the other day, literally yesterday, talking to my husband, he was talking to me about an instance with a coworker who's also an Asian man. And they talk about this stereotype and they encourage each other to ask for what you want. And I think that's why
Mm.
we do need to talk about it with especially fellow queer Asian folk,
Mhm.
is we can relate to it with each other and also just give each other the boost of saying, ask for what you want.
Mm.
People will hopefully listen, but they won't ever know without asking. And we can't change anything. We can't change the system without us doing some of the work of advocating for ourselves.
Why do you think it's hard for us to ask and advocate?
That's a great question. And if I can be rhetorical about it, why do you think it's hard for us to ask? I think you and I, like,
Yeah.
especially found a moment where we're like, we need to go break out into our own and build our own thing.
Mhm.
Right. So, I'm curious to know also from you, like, what made you feel that you needed to do that?
Yeah. So 2 points come up for me. I think the first point is you had asked, historically, we build these stereotypes, right? And one thing that I learned, I was reading books about this, and it's culminated through a bunch of different books and kind of a theme, has also been Asian immigration early on here in the United States, started by a lot of military folks, right? Bringing wives over. And there was this whole culture of submission that was quite literally groomed into the Asian perspective of Asian people. Not because this is how Asian people are, but this was because the Asians that they were exposed to, slash, they were bringing back from Asia into America as wives at the time, were a type of personality that they had picked for, right? And then you had media being created about the Asian folks that were here. And it was actually really healing to read a lot about this because it was adding so many layers of context into it, right? In the workplace, there were so many instances when World War II, for example, you had Asians who weren't submissive to the US government, specifically Japanese Americans during World War II. They had their citizenship rescinded. And you had a whole generation of people who were even US born Japanese Americans with no citizenship because they didn't submit to, I think they had to have these Japanese folks declare Japan as an enemy of the state of America. And they didn't agree with that. So then they had their citizenship rescinded. But then they ended up corralling all of them into internment camps. And the way that they framed it was you would go to the internment camp because this is how you're going to support our country, right? And so then they lost everything, businesses, jobs, livelihoods, homes. And it's interesting to look back at this past, and you have generations past where now even to have a citizenship as an immigrant, you have to fulfill a certain type of role, criteria. You can't even go to jail because that will compromise your citizenship and stuff like that. And so actually, I want to start off with this because this gave me so much more understanding into why the stereotype existed in a way that I could build more compassion around it. And I think the first step for myself, at least, was not just the pushing away of it, but really understanding and having grace with it because I was seeing this show up with like my mom, and all these other people within the community members. And I was also so angry about it. I was like, why are we like this?
Yeah.
I was like, I
Yeah.
don't get why we're like this.
Yeah.
And the more I understood, I said, this is because we were told we have to be like this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can't stay in America. We don't have a citizenship. We can't exist.
Yeah.
And then the other part was why I ended up starting my own agency was I was in the corporate world, right? Listening to everyone, taking all this advice and working really, really, really hard. I recall wherever I was at, I was working harder than so many of the people there, even leadership levels, 1, 2, 3 levels above me.
Yeah.
And even when I branched off and I was still freelancing on my own, it was so hard to compel people who are more often white folks, straight, cisgender men. Usually you see this, especially in the creative advertising industry,
Yep.
and convince them why I was worth whatever I was worth, right? But what was interesting was even, so I recall specifically vividly, there was an opportunity that came up and it was freelancing with this other agency and I had already done work with them, right? And they were just passing me over to somebody else. At the time, I had already led some of the projects internally, and they would just give me a budget and they'd be like, Steven, figure it out, right? And even having worked with other people and the person who I was interviewing with, it was her budget. And so, new person, but it was with all these other people. I've been in so many interviews, and this isn't just one of them, but specifically in this one, she was asking me such tactical questions about portfolio, resume. And after having been in this industry for like 15, 16, 17 years, like I think, and then just being asked some of the questions that like I would be advising on somebody just entering the industry, right? There's some questions around like getting more specific, like, oh, have you ever built a design system, right? And it was just so, I was like, I don't understand how I can be doing the work that I'm doing if I haven't even touched some of these things, right?
Right.
And I've been in so many instances where I've had interviews, and it's interesting how I've shared this experience with so many people, and they're like, no, Steven, they're just genuinely asking that. And I'm like, would you have asked that to a white applicant? Would you have asked that to a straight white applicant, straight male white applicant? And it's interesting to see the juxtaposition. I would actually see that applicant being so offended in that meeting. And people wouldn't ask these people certain things because they take for granted or they accept as if you have this position, you'd already have done this, right? And so going back to why even myself and why and I just had this conversation like this week too of why even myself in a corporate setting, I really struggled was I just kept hitting this glass ceiling.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even me having to prove by doing the work, even after having done the work, people just who weren't willing to see my worth, there was nothing I could do to prove to them,
Yeah.
you know? And I think this is advice that I rarely see that is a big part of our nonprofit of what we share, working with queer, BIPOC folks. Sometimes there's advice that's given to us that we shouldn't be following, namely, if there's questions that's asked of us, right? Of things that is far beyond, like we've done far and beyond, that there are some things that hold us back, which is also other people's expectations of us, you know,
Yeah.
and that we actually have to reframe some of the questions that's asked, formulate in a way that's more successful. But anyway, I ended up turning that opportunity down because I was like, and that was a big realization moment. I was like, I can't work under somebody who I'm going to have to fight teeth and nail on the smallest things.
And continue the same store, right? And like
Yeah.
the history of what you shared and how it's so entrenched in
Yeah.
our culture, especially our workplace culture, to this day, so alive and well,
Hmm.
is also why I just relate to your story of hitting that glass ceiling. So
Yeah.
my now business partner and I, we were working together in a corporate setting, and there are great people there. Like, I don't want to make it sound like we weren't grateful for the opportunity or the experience there, but
Yeah.
we just recognize that there are a lot of things that we cannot change because of how just the largeness of
Hmm.
the cultural shift that needs to happen. So that's why we wanted to go off and find our own, establish our own business together.
We almost have to. Like we literally have to
Right.
exist, you know?
And
Yeah.
and to take that opportunity to then craft our own culture where there isn't that feeling of a glass ceiling for whatever identity you are. So
Hmm.
that's what motivated us to go off and find Bellweather and to reestablish and rewrite what the culture can be.
Hmm.
We weren't gonna do that in a corporate setting. So we took it in our own hands, very much like you did, to work on creating something that would bring voices to the table that are typically overlooked or that may have been, whether it's intentional or unintentional.
Yeah.
And, through that journey of rewriting what the workplace could look like, we, of course, you stumble along the way because there's so much you have to unlearn and unpack to
Yeah.
reestablish. But if you aren't making mistakes along the way, then I don't know if you can really authentically say what's working and what's not working. So,
Hmm.
that's why we wanted to find our own business together, my partner and I. And, since then we've had another partner join us.
Yeah.
But it really is just we hit the glass ceiling, my woman partner and I, like for many reasons, either deserving title upgrades or, personally for me, I saw, a lot of, not within this company, but I saw a lot of my white male counterparts who can't arguably say they have more skills or anything compared to me.
Oh, you see the trajectory literally, right? Like
Oh my God.
skyrocket.
Like even to this day, they're like, oh, I just like threw out this idea and I got a whole bunch of money from my client. And
Yeah.
the things that my partners and I have to do to ask for the budgets they get is like, we
Hmm.
have to do a great dog and pony show to get the kind of clients that I might see my other peers that are white male counterparts get.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm happy for them. I love them, but it is that reality. So
Call a spade a spade. And we've seen it. You and I have seen it. We are working so hard, tirelessly in a corporate setting, even going above and beyond. And then I think what a lot of people don't realize is you reach a certain threshold beyond just production, right? But once you want to start working to start managing teams or going into any leadership, it really is who's going to vouch for you and who's going to create space for you
Yeah.
and who's willing to pull you along. And when the leadership is all men, all white men, like they somehow feel this empathy to other people who look like them. And that's why diversity, especially in a leadership capacity, is so important because that empathy is needed, but is needed especially through other people who look like us, have experiences like us. That's tough. Oh my God, it's easy. It's tough.
Yeah, it really is. And, it goes back to this is why it's so important. And I hope that
Yeah.
if there's anything that can resonate with queer Asian folks out there, it is
Yeah.
you have to ask for what you want. It doesn't do any harm to not ask.
Yeah.
It might do a little bit more harm to you, actually, if you don't even try to ask.
Mm. Because the worst that could happen is a no, right? And
Exactly.
we're already taking that by walking away.
Exactly. And I think there's nothing incredibly unique about me or,
Yeah.
that I feel is, wow, this is what makes me so special that I could go off and create a business. It just takes a little bravery and audacity to say, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to ask for what I want and see what happens.
Mm.
Because the flip side is I could always go back into the corporate setting or go work for someone. Like we all have that
Yeah.
as a potential option to go back
Yeah.
to.
Okay, let me ask.
Yeah.
So for folks who are listening and it's just hard, like what recommendations or advice would you have for either entrepreneurial girlies, corporate girlies, or just like life girlies? Like asking, because what I've also heard is, this whole notion of humbleness, humility is so important, right? That hold people back. Or they're just like, no, it's going to be a flat out no. So why even bother? Many, many takes. But do you have any advice for them of how to get better at putting themselves out there and asking?
You just have to keep doing it. And I think what people are actually afraid of is rejection. And
Mm,
I think a part of the journey of being in the workplace setting is you need to get comfortable with rejection. That doesn't mean that you should ever stop trying.
mm,
I can't tell you how many pitches that my partners and I have gone after and the amount of time we get rejected more than we win.
mm-hmm.
New projects, new business. You have to just be okay with that. That is part of the process. We are incrementally moving the needle every time though. Every time we interview, every time we ask for something we want, the needle is moving. That is how we have grown to what we are today. So for anyone out there, not just the business entrepreneur folk but also the people in the environments of corporate, perhaps smaller environments, you can only just keep asking because
Mm-hmm.
we really have to ask ourselves, what is the alternative? Not asking means you're going to just stay exactly where you are,
Mm-hmm.
which if you are comfortable with that, if you are in a place where you're comfortable with where you are, I don't want to push people into believing that they have to ask for more. But if you're someone that isn't happy with where you are in your current station, then it really truly doesn't hurt to just keep trying and keep asking. And what you do need to do is also find a community of people, what I like to call a personal board of directors, to go to and say, I'd love to just ask for advice. I'm going through this in the workplace. Like, can you help me navigate the situation? I love doing that for people. Like, I love when women or other people of color reach out to me just asking for what they should ask for in terms of a salary.
Mm-hmm.
I've helped navigate negotiations for a lot of my close friends or people that I've just met professionally. I'm happy to do that work and give that advice and hopefully for them to get what they want out of it. So, in addition to advocating for yourself, finding that group of people, or again, what I call that personal board of directors, I think is really important for people that are really interested in growth throughout their career.
Mm-hmm.
So find that, establish that community and what that might look like for you. But
Mm-hmm.
I am such a believer that, not everything can just be done alone. We really need to get back to believing in the idea that community and a village is what lifts everyone up. So,
Yeah.
so find those people, find those good friends that you can really trust their advice on, and then just go for it. Cause at least you have people that are like cheerleaders for you, that are
Mm.
gassing you up
Mm-hmm.
to go talk to your boss or to help write a great email, saying, hey, can I talk to you about something?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it might be, it helps to have that personal board of directors that are with you, behind you to help push you forward.
Yeah. And if you ask somebody for advice on these things and they do not gas you up, that is such a red flag for me,
Huge.
right?
Yeah. Huge.
Like, these are not the people you should be surrounding yourself with because they're all about ensuring you stay little, even regardless of work, even in personal life, right?
Yep.
Relationships.
Yep. I've seen that too firsthand in the professional setting where someone gave that advice to another person to
Hmm.
to not come out public about being a voice behind this really amazing platform. They ended up deciding, you know what, I'm not going to listen to that advice. I'm going to say I am the person behind this platform.
Hmm.
And they ended up selling the company for a significant amount of money and they are thriving. So the people that give you that type of lack of support or that don't push you or that don't give you that advice to propel you forward, they're absolutely someone to not ever go back to again. It's not someone that has ever been a friend. Most certainly not someone you should ever go back to professional advice on,
Hmm.
because real people that believe in you will support you and say, go for it. It doesn't hurt to try.
Hmm.
But anyone that tries to quiet you or say, step back a little bit, yeah, not your friend. And that's really important. And I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. It could also be family members, right? It could be relatives.
Absolutely.
And I think I've experienced this a few times, and my friends are also going through this where you might have just also outgrown relationships, and you have different phases of your life that you enter through. And not everyone comes along with you, but also people do shift over time and things come up with them, right? Like in my sphere, I think one thing that is pretty big and resonant is I spent a ton of years just in the weeds with partying. I was like out like 4 or 5 times a week. And I do have a chunk of friends that have come with me through that era into this next era of my life. But I also had a chunk of friends that I was talking about these things I wanted to go after, communities I wanted to build, businesses I wanted to create. And their whole notion was, well, that doesn't sound fun, you know? And I think for many years, I tried to reconcile that. And my talk that I have in my head was, I was like, well, if these are important people in my life, but they don't agree, then it shouldn't be something I go after. And I didn't realize how that narrative was really holding me back. And I talked about it on my podcast a lot where I had health issues. And that was an awakening moment where I realized people who didn't have the capacity couldn't show up for me there. Right.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of people in that space. And I think as we evolve naturally, I think advice that had really helped me was when the relationships around us start to look like they're shifting or we have to reevaluate, it means change is happening for better or for worse. and,
Yeah.
and it is indicative that we are growing in a way and creating space and compassion to hear like what is really important to us.
Yeah.
And is such a important aspect of growth.
And I have so much empathy for people that may not be able to recognize that that's what's
Mm,
happening. Is we talked about this a little earlier, is how do you know what's not serving you?
yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, my sympathy goes out for those people that just might be surrounded by the wrong type of people that don't
Mhm.
advocate for or support their friend or loved one as they should be. So
Mhm.
again, choose your personal board of directors. And I don't mean that in like a cringy, like everyone should be a business type friend.
That's like counsel, advisors, right?
Right.
Mhm.
In everything in your personal life. Cause that saying where your friends are your mirrors, it's really true. Like they should reflect the kind of person that you want to be.
Yeah.
So, this is why I'm so excited to meet other queer Asian, especially business owner type people like yourself, because
Mhm.
I can only see benefits coming from that. Like I can only see goodness of really helping each other out and supporting each other
Mhm.
and, relying on this network to seek advice and to help each other all thrive. Yeah, I think only greatness can come from that. And I only want to see people do really well. I
Mhm.
don't imagine a scenario where I don't want someone to do well. Like anyone that I can identify with and or identifies with me, anything I can do to help them on their come up, like I want to be part of that.
And you realize that when people aren't afraid to give and aren't afraid for people to come up, these are the people that you will also start to emulate, and you become more like, and we all
Yeah.
like it's beyond scarcity mindset. It's the awareness that there is so much out there that we can help. Like a rising tide raises all boats, right? It's similar to that where it's,
Right.
but like a boat with a giant gaping hole, like you can only carry so much, right?
Yeah.
And I think we are so very much like the person we surround ourselves with. And I'm very grateful for our conversation. And it's just, you have such a breadth of knowledge and insight. And it's really great to also see other folks, other queer Asian folks thriving, excelling. You and I have worked on many similar things together and hope our listeners are getting so much out of it. We get it. It's hard. It's hard out there.
Yeah.
It's
It's hard. And, I think, I keep going back to wanting to just tell people I truly feel there isn't anything incredibly unique about me. There's no special superpower. It really is just a little bit of audacity and hard work, like just putting in a little bit of that extra elbow grease, a little more hustle.
Mhm.
But of course, making sure your life is balanced. You got to take care of yourself too. You can't just be about the hustle. That will burn you out and make the whole experience not joyful. So,
Yeah.
I also want to pair the journey with, yes, you got to put in the work and the grind, but make sure that you're also taking care of yourself, like vacation time off. That stuff is still very important.
Mhm.
So especially with the younger audiences that are just entering the workforce, work and work and work, but also make sure you are playing, make sure you're eating all your meals, have time to exercise
Mhm.
and to get breath of fresh air and to spend quality time with people you care about.
Yeah.
So, that's also part of the culture that I want to create is
Yeah.
giving that flexibility of people living their life. Like, I really don't want people
Yeah.
to tell me I need to go to the doctors for XYZ reason. You don't need to tell me any of that. All you need to say is, I'm done with my work and I'm going to take this time to go to an appointment. That's all you need to say.
Mhm.
So, to, anyone out there, it's like definitely make sure you're taking care of yourself too through
Mhm.
this journey of hustling.
Yeah. I know we're nearing the end. A few quick questions for you.
Sure.
What is one lesson you'd like our listeners to take away with?
If there's anything that you can walk away from hearing this conversation, it really is you are very capable.
Yeah.
You just have to be brave and take the leap. Advocate for yourself. It never hurts to ask for what you want.
Hmm.
The worst that can happen is someone will say no. Keep trying.
Hmm. And what is something that's bringing you some joy lately?
A lot of things are bringing me joy lately. Work wise, we've been on set for the past month for multiple client photo and video production, which means to me that really soon a lot of large campaigns are rolling out from my team at Bellweather. And then personally, just being freshly and newly married has brought an immense amount of joy. So on the personal front, just sharing this life journey with my partner and also the beautiful and wonderful people that showed up for us on our day. I'm feeling a lot of joy through just, yeah, all those people that showed up for us.
And how can people find you?
Personally, for me, find me on LinkedIn. I'm Louis Lee on LinkedIn. If you have any questions that I can help out with in terms of a professional advice, find me there, DM me. On Instagram, our Bellweather agency, it's at Bellweather Agency, and then our website, www.bellweather.agency. And then I'm sure you could find my contact through there. So if you want to reach out to me directly, feel free to do so if there's any way I can help you.
Thank you so much. And for folks who are listening, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave us a rating and review. Actually, I will ask to leave a rating review. They are a way that it helps the platforms that we're on see our episodes, and your reviews and your kind words help others discover Yellow Glitter. If you want to follow us at Yellow Glitter PD on socials, and give us a shout and let us know what you want to hear more of and listen to some clips. And for full episodes, transcripts, you can visit our website at yellowglitterpodcast.com. Louis, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast. You've provided a ton of great insights and just so much empathy for everything that I've experienced and I've gone through. And so thank you for echoing that. And just, I think overall, you have such a calm, soothing demeanor. And it's just a breath of just tranquil air. And so that I appreciate you so much for being on with us.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for having me. And again, creating this platform to really unite a lot of queer Asian folks out there. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for those of you listening, thank you for your time. So grateful we got to spend a big part of your day with us. And without further ado, we hope you have a great rest of your day. Be mindful, ask for things, and put yourself out there. And we'll chat with you later. Bye now.